Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Well, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism, folks. Lovely to have you back. Hope you and yours are all well. Another week goes by and plenty been happening that I've got to discuss. And today I'm joined by two, possibly three. I'm waiting in a third person, Phil Boswell, who you asked me to bring back as soon as, who's in India now, and I'm hoping to, he'll be joining us shortly. But I'm joined immediately by Michelle Ferns of the Alapa Party and by the Mohawk himself, Mr. Iain Lawson. Michelle, hello, my friend. How are you?
Morning, Roddy. I'm grand, thank you. How are you?
Good. Well, that's fine. Well, I've got, the Paisley Mohawk. I'm waiting on the Coatbridge Cavalier, and we've got the Dundonian Glaswegian with us as well. So we've got a full spectrum. How have you all been? Had a good week? How about you, Iain? Good week?
Yeah, of course. It's been an excellent week. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Good. Do you enjoy the budget?
Well, I mean, I think, the spin on the budget is quite remarkable. It was, to be fair, a most unusual budget in so much as it actually did spend a lot of money. And it was definitely the end of austerity in budget terms. But I think the reason why that happened has not been openly and honestly accounted for. I mean, the reason for it is one thing and one thing only. It's the hope of the Tories that it stops the absolute disaster that Brexit is having on the economy, absolutely collapsing it. I mean, that's why you've got the big spend. The big spends to hopefully, artificially, keep the economy afloat for the next 12 months or so, so that Brexit doesn't absolutely floor it. And that's the only reason why you're getting this level of public expenditure spending and all the rest. The problem, of course, is sooner or later, it's all going to have to be paid for. And, at that point, you'll find that Rishi Sunak's moved on to another job. Some passing stranger will have been appointed as the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he'll have to deliver the bad news. I mean, even though they were giving away huge amounts of money, they didn't give it to the right people. If they actually
well, it depends.
It went to their right people.
Exactly.
Whereas, if you give a bit extra money to people at the poorer end of the spectrum, you can be absolutely sure it's going to be spent fairly shortly because people need to spend it to survive. Mm-hmm. When you give large amounts of money to the rich, then it's quite likely it will sit in a bank account somewhere.
In Panama.
Yeah, exactly. And not be used in an economy. I mean, it's the absolute bizarre economics of the Tory party and the Tory government.
Yeah, it was a banker's budget. Michelle, Iain's right. It's going to be paid one day, and it'll be paid for in inflation, which actually will help the wealthier. Again, they thrive on inflation because it means interest rates go up, so therefore their money in the bank goes up. But for the people that we're associated with, the poor, the working class, the pensioners who've lost the triple lock in 2,600, this is a hurtful, spiteful budget, is it not?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with what Iain said more in terms of style and no substance in terms of, your big giveaways. And actually on that subject, what do we think about the biggest ever settlement for the devolved nations in terms of what they're trying to buy with that? But Iain's absolutely right. Yes, the big money's been made available as we've seen in on Rishi Sunak's previous form, when money needs to be found for reasons that can absolutely be found. When it's £1 billion contracts for your friends in PPE, that money can absolutely be found. When it comes to helping out people that are on their knees, with the universal credit uplift, that's the way. And as you mentioned with the pensions, it's a huge betrayal of pensions. We already have the lowest pension in Europe. The triple. I think in the last statistics, something like the population of Dundee in terms of pensioners that were in Scotland that are living in poverty. So another whack on their very little resources that they've got. Yeah, it's no surprise really. Tories are going to be Tories. They're going to make sure their mates are fine. As you say, it's paid for by inflation, and also we've seen that in the pattern of the national insurance rises, where it's the lowest paid that are going to be, as ever, contributing the most. So more of the same as far as I can see.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, Iain, the OBR have looked at this and said that, what's coming is that COVID has cost the economy 2% GDP, but this latest is going to cost us 4% of GDP. Brexit, more than COVID, it's going to be double the hit. So we're getting this set of 2% and another 4% of cutback. And if between 2008 and 2018, we know the pain that we all suffered then, that was 2% after the bank crash. This is going to be a disaster for the low end, the poor, and those in poverty already, is it not?
Oh, well, without doubt. I mean, it's interesting that the entire power of the state, whether it be through the media or through organisations, within the state, are all intent in blaming everything in COVID and, avoiding discussing the impact of Brexit, because, Brexit's causing so many problems for businesses up and down the country. I mean, the most recent, obviously, is the fishing crisis. And I couldn't believe the British government reaction to that. We have summoned the French ambassador to the Foreign Office. You don't summon an ally. That's what you use when you're bringing in some rogue state. You definitely don't discuss your nearest European neighbour in that manner without expecting kickback. And then on top of that, they make these sort of bellicose noises that, we will retaliate. Where do these people come from? All the French need to do is shut the Channel ports. And 1 week later, Britain will be starving. There is nothing Britain can do to escalate and retaliate and win. What they can do is escalate and make the situation much, much worse. They really are in an awful mess. This is only the tip of the iceberg. You're going to see, I mean, I don't often go shopping, and my pals don't often go shopping, but I was at the pub last night and my pals, all male, were discussing the huge increases that they're seeing in the prices in supermarkets. Goods that used to be 19 pence, now 34 pence. I mean, these are the sort of increases that are happening. And the government talk about 4% inflation. It's going to be a lot higher than that.
For sure.
And the other thing is they're gambling, because they're throwing all this money at it in the hope that it will not, that there'll be growth and all the rest of it. But if that growth doesn't materialise, then you've just doubled down on the problem.
And if it doesn't, if the growth isn't big enough to cover the inflation, then it's useless as well.
Or wages. Wages are not going anywhere near where inflation's going. So as well as your item that costs 17 pence now costing 34 pence, your wages are worth less, and they're going. You'll have seen across the country there's been threatened, industrial actions, which has been, the last gasp in the interest of making Scotland and Glasgow in particular look like it's functioning perfectly well. Solutions and money have been thrown at the last minute, which, as Roddy said in terms of our conversation before, which will have to be paid for by someone.
We know who the someone will be.
Yes. That attitude for the British government towards the French is really a leftover, a hangover for that empire and that colonial mindset. That they're going to tell the rest of the world and the rest of Europe what they're going to do. But in terms of how to win friends and influence people, I mean, it's really, there's no sympathy with Britain. There's no will to help Britain out. It's mess it's absolutely created for itself, but unfortunately for all of us, including Scotland, obviously.
But yeah, the other thing that's got to happen, Michelle, is what we're not talking about is the electricity and gas prices are going to come through. Those bills haven't started arriving quite yet. That's going to be a hit again on the poorest in our community. And also
the public energy company.
Correct. And well, the petrol, which is at the highest price it's ever been, which is now a curse in Scotland, apparently having all this oil. But that if the price of the fuel goes up, then the price of everything goes up because it costs more to do that. And I've just got news from Techie. I'm glad to say our live feed from the satellite to India has started working, and Phil is just about to come in and join us. There we go. And you're better. We'd lost you there for a second, Iain. We're going to get the top of your head. Phil, we got you at last, my friend.
How you doing?
We're doing good. How are you?
Excellent. It's a bit hot.
Well, we've got a bit of delay. We see your lips moving and then the sound arrives. But hey, it's better than nothing. We're just discussing the budget, Phil, on the fuel increases and the energy increases and how that's going to affect the poorest in society. Did you get a chance to see the budget and read up on it?
Nope.
There we go. That's the end of that conversation. That's that conversation.
I've been involved, obviously, in a few, analysing a few, and it's the same profile. I saw some comments on it, and there are no surprises. I mean, what we're seeing here, you were talking about COVID and Brexit and the hit the punter's going to feel. I mean, Boris will get his payoff after he leaves office. That's how the corruption works. The Brexit was by the few, for the few. The few people will do very well out of it, principally hedge funds. So like Christian Odey, Michael Hines, just look at who backed Vote Leave and you'll see who's benefiting from Brexit. And this budget is the knock-on effect. The fuel prices are appalling, absolutely appalling. I heard Iain talking about the price of fish. Not quite, but the costs in the supermarket are horrific. It's gone up and up, and it's going to be the poor that's going to be hit the most. What can you do about it? Get out of this mess. Scotland. Why are we sitting back, saying nothing and doing nothing about it? Just whinging? Have we been whinging for 7 years? Is that it?
Well, we've been certainly marking time, which brings me on. Just one last point on, before we do move away from Brexit and the impounding of that boat. I heard someone saying, this is a Scottish boat, but apparently it's not. It's a Dutch-owned, registered in Turkey and crewed by God knows who. So how it's been called a Scottish fishing trawler that's been impounded by our French allies, I do not know. But the one thing I would like to say, and it lead me on to what have we been doing, is the one very sinister, most sinister thing. Everything was sinister about that budget. But Iain, the thing that got me was the direct funding of certain Scottish local authority infrastructure projects by the British government. This is in direct contravention of the Scotland Act. And to me, it sounds like another breach of the Treaty of Union, that they're bypassing the legal Scottish representation.
Well, it was a slap in the face, and it was an intentional slap in the face.
Yeah.
And can you imagine being a Nicola supporter and having to rely on the English Chancellor telling you where funds in Scotland are going to be spent when those funds should have come to the Scottish Exchequer and been taken from there? So, I mean, it really is just another example of why time is not on our side. The First Minister thinks time is on her side, that she holds all the cards. Well, by the time she looks at the pack, she's going to be left with one card, and that's going to be the Joker, because everything's getting removed from Scotland, bit by bit, very, very openly now. In the past, they used to try to disguise it. Now they do it blatantly in front of our eyes. And our elected representatives are pathetic. That's the only word that can be used.
It's a worry. I would like to talk about a Channel 4 interview that was done yesterday, I believe, by our First Minister. Techie, could you put up this interview that Nicola Sturgeon had about COP26?
Scotland's going to be in the spotlight, isn't it? And you're going to get the opportunity to meet world leaders and their delegations. Will you be using that opportunity to talk not just about climate change, but to make the case for independence as well?
No, look, the focus over the next 2 weeks is on the climate, on making sure that everybody who has any responsibility here is using their influence to try to get us to a good deal. I don't think anybody is in any doubt about my support for Scottish independence, but the focus of the next 2 weeks is about making sure Scotland's in a position to lead by example. Scotland is seen by the UN, by countries around the world as a global leader, but the bar of global leadership is still not high enough on the issue of climate. So I'll be, the Scottish Government is the co-chair right now of what's called the Under 2 Coalition, bringing state and regional devolved governments together to make sure we're maximising our influence. That's what I'm going to be working as hard as possible to try to do over the duration of this summit.
I said, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm absolutely infuriated by that climb down by our First Minister. The fact that she's got this golden opportunity of 160 world leaders in Scotland. She's excluded, Scotland's excluded, all the world's media's there, and she's not going to use it to promote independence because she's got some wee subcommittee pretending she's still relevant with her, what were they called? I can't remember what it was called now. But it is irrelevant. Who cares? No one cares. I'm raging, Michelle. I don't know about you, but this opportunity that's been lost.
Well, Kenny McCaskill and I had went along when you could still when the SEC was still designated part of Glasgow and not a UN zone, taking along an empty chair with a saltire, just pointing out the total ridiculousness of all of the nations that are going to be inside that building, and Glasgow and Scotland's voice won't be there. I guess that would have been the ideal solution, but given that we're not, the fact that Nicola's passing up the opportunity to raise the hostage situation we're in, especially given the lack of empathy and support for Britain right now. I think Europeans and world leaders certainly would be pushing at a door that's more open than it's ever been. But it goes to what Iain was talking about earlier about the dismantling of devolution, everything from local authority level to the internal market to, I think the second reading of the devolution bill goes through this week at Westminster as well. So in plain sight, dismantling all of the levers of devolution that we had hoped that, well, I certainly hoped when devolution came that the idea that we could prove that we could competently, not just competently, but by dynamically and innovation, that we could push Scotland to, further and faster than we could ever be as part of this the broken union, has turned out not to be, well, as we all know, especially over the last 7 years, has turned out not to be the case. And I think what you see now is the outcome of what is, as far as I can see, a permanently devolved executive identifying as a government. But if you actually want to be a government, if you actually want to govern, then you have to take every opportunity to put that argument out there, especially, as I say, when I feel that the door's more open than it's ever been.
Correct.
I just don't understand the logic behind it. So if it's a flaw in me, maybe the other guys here can point out why you would waste such an opportunity, given that you're not exactly given any platform in COP26 to put forward Scotland's arguments. It doesn't logically make sense, and this is where you always arrive back at, which she says in that interview, nobody doubts that I want independence for Scotland. Sorry, I do. Yeah, because the best way to judge somebody is by what they do,
actions,
not by what they say. And so we've had 7 years, and we're now at COP, as you say, with that brilliant opportunity to make Scotland's voice heard loud and clear. And apparently now is not the time. And that might be, you might think that the demographics mean that eventually, Nicola thinks she's got all the time in the world. Well, good for Nicola. But lots of people in Scotland have not got any time. Phil talked about, whether it's because your age or whether it's because, they're predicting growth to be back at pre-pandemic levels by 2022. Pre-pandemic levels in Glasgow and in Scotland were dire. Dire. Even if you believe that, which I don't. But I'm sitting in Shettleston, a couple of miles away from. We had United Biscuits shut down. So Kate Forbes, we heard from Kate Forbes yesterday, that's it, the game's a bogey. Scottish Government have tried everything, can't get this the United Biscuits to stay open. I think Clyde, just to be fair, extorted their fair share of money at the Scottish Government, especially when they always intended shutting it. But that's not a new story across Glasgow and the West. The job losses on the back of Brexit and the pandemic across Glasgow and the West are expected to be 60,000 in a population of 600,000. That's huge. These are no issues that can wait. 1 in 3 people in Glasgow can't afford to feed their rains.
Correct.
1 in 3 people in Glasgow can't afford to turn the fire on when it gets cold. And it's such a resource-rich country as we are.
Correct.
We've not, these people haven't got time. A generation.
Well, it's also a fact that Ireland, with not the natural resources of us, they're growing at 10% just now, despite the pandemic, because unlike the growth we're getting is going into the hands and pockets of bankers and the rich. Phil, Nicola Sturgeon told us after 2016 when she got her first mandate that now's not the time. We have to wait and see how Brexit pans out. Okay, we thought. And we'll have to, then it was, well, let's see, it's not the time now because let's see what actually happens when it's implemented. So now's not the time. And then she said during COVID, we can't do it because it's COVID. And that's not the time to be campaigning for independence. I'm stopping all campaigning. And now it's COP26. Nah, it's not time now. So if it's not now, when, Phil? When will it be time? When will she not have an excuse not to campaign and instead bloody campaign for our independence?
Well, the first question is, what is the raison d'etre for the SNP? What does the SNP stand for? What is it elected for? What do people believe it's elected for? Not everybody reads what's in your manifestos, but everybody understands that SNP stands for independence. So when you have all these world leaders in your hometown and you should have some opportunity to speak with them, well, why aren't you speaking about your primary function? The prime directive of the SNP and for the independence movement is to gain independence. I mean, I was at the Danish Parliament as an MP at a green energy climate change conference, and I was shouting about Scotland, and I was pointing out that the British government were disingenuous in their moves towards green energy, because they were cancelling all of the green initiatives. They didn't take it seriously. They weren't interested in any of the initiatives. They've all been cancelled, including carbon capture and storage and various others. So I then think Nicola's given us advice here, okay, but what's her qualifications and experience on this? As a lifetime campaigner for independence, Nicola's an expert on independence, you'd like to think, and how we get it. Why are we so concerned about something that, quite frankly, is secondary? And there are different opinions out there. I don't necessarily buy everything that's said about the climate change. I'm not denying climate change. I think you'd be a fool to do that. But what is our priorities and what should it be? And not talking about that which will give our people not just the freedom, but enable us to drag more of our people out of poverty and give us a decent standard of living and a decent future should be primary. That's your job. That's what you're supposed to do.
Correct. Absolutely. Iain, you're an old campaigner like myself. You've done many a campaign. How would you like to have been running a campaign with 160 world leaders in Glasgow? And I got a British government excluding you from the meeting. What would you have done with that, my friend?
Well, I just find the whole situation completely bizarre. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There's never been any meeting or any congregation of world leaders, anything like this size, available in Scotland. It should be the most remarkable opportunity for the independence cause. Instead, Nicola's accepted that she can't even get a job, taking the quotes at the event. I mean, she's excluded. She's outside, pressing her nose against the window. As you say, she's got some small side authority for some subcommittee that, we don't even know.
For devolved regions, she said. For devolved regions.
Yeah, well, it's just a colonial get-together. I mean, how many of the 161 other real leaders, really real countries, have devolved administrations? There'll not be too many teacups needed for that particular room when it comes, because all these nations have worked out that if you want a say at the top table, you need to be independent. The only person that doesn't seem to realise that is Nicola Sturgeon. And I mean, to open up, just absolutely outrageous. I mean, what would have been the impact on the world and on our case for independence if Nicola had offered to lead the AUOB march and to, at the end of it, declare that the biggest progress the people of Scotland could make towards climate change would be to take control of our own resources and then use them in a green manner, to enrich our people. Instead, they're running about behind, they're not even behind her back anymore. They're doing it right in front of her and basically taking her powers, which are already extremely limited, even more of them away. And they're bypassing her. And I mean, there can be nothing more humiliating, surely, for a politician to stand there with a mandate from the people who elected you to do something, but to be unable or unwilling to use it when people are frankly just taking the mickey out of you and you're powerless and you're seen as powerless. It's a horrible thing to happen to anyone. But Nicola's brought it on herself, as has her supporters. It's not just Nicola that's to blame here. It's all those supposed independence warriors who are happy to accept second, third, fourth, fifth best and to trickle along at a pace that would, you're getting overtaken by glaciers. It really is quite amazing. And, they should be ashamed of themselves.
Michelle, if not now, then when does she start campaigning?
Well, exactly when. I mean, you were talking in your when you introduced Iain at the last bit there about ceasing campaigning. Really, ceasing what campaigning? What campaign? Well, how could you stop what you've not started? The recent FOIs have shown there's been absolutely no preparation. There's been is lots of reasons and lots of why now is not the time. Why is COVID? Why is Brexit? And we've talked about this before, but for me that was the final straw. I just don't. I've never been able to get my head around the fact that we took our eye off the ball when a very material change that was used as the example in the manifesto came to pass, and that we didn't start campaigning, we didn't start moving towards Independence Day, and instead of fight to save England from itself, from the Brexit I voted for, to be fair, and as Democrats. And Iain, you were talking before about losing that opportunity. I don't think that the conversation about independence and climate justice are separate. What there is a lot of concentration on this time, as opposed to the Paris Accord last time, is there's a realisation and an acknowledgement that climate justice and social justice are connected. That when we're doing the whole virtue signalling about, people doing, there's no many people in Shettleston going for 3 long haul flights a year. There's no many people driving big Range Rovers to their work. What I find is when the virtue signallers and the very upperly mobile middle classes give us all lectures about the kind of choices that should be making, well, their choices need money. ASDA don't take virtue signalling. They want actual cash for people's messages. And I've found that what an opportunity is hugely being missed is because, for me, the opportunity for independence is a chance to level up, is a chance to deliver social justice, and that's no separate from climate justice. And Nicola Sturgeon should be taking every opportunity to say, in order to deliver climate justice that works for everyone and that is sustainable, we have to be linking that to social justice, and we have to be linking that to the political structures that we have to deliver that, which in Scotland's case has to be independence. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And I think Phil's absolutely right. Nicola should be the head of every marching as close to the blue zone as we can get. telling everybody in the world that Scotland demands its independence, and stop looking for that route, for that permission that's never coming, as we all know. Start taking the argument to somewhere else then. Start looking for that backup. Let people know what's coming, so when we take a different route rather than a referendum or a Section 30, you know that we've laid some of that groundwork for that.
Yeah. Phil, you want to come in there?
Yeah, there's a couple of points made that was excellent, and it's something that really angered me was the title of this group, the Devolved Regions. Now that gets me going. I mean, you're the elected leader of the country, the parliament in the country that is Scotland. Why would you accept a position on a committee called Devolved Regions? What a slap in the face. And I completely agree with the argument about going out and marching, because okay, the UK media is not going to report this, but you're damn sure every newspaper and TV station all across Europe will be reporting the elected leader of the country in which this huge event is being held is marching in protest at how we're being treated. It beggars belief that you wouldn't take that advantage to communicate with. Do we aspire to be Europeans, to be part of the EU family, or are we going to continue to doff the cap and be kowtowists? I'm getting angry. I'm getting angry about it.
Good. We should be angry. Everyone should be angry, Iain. I mean, it's a fact, Iain. If Nicola tomorrow said, people, I am disgusted, I am angry, I am going to march with AOUB, she would put 100,000 boots in the street. But
more than that.
Yeah, but it seems to me, and I'm going to be a cynic, rumours are abounding that she's after a UN job, and she maybe doesn't want to upset a UN-sponsored event. Now, that's maybe cynical and unfair of me, but I tell you what I've seen since November 2014 makes me cynical and makes me think there's an ulterior motive to this, because it cannot be about advancing the cause of Scottish independence by not talking about Scottish independence when 160 world leaders and the world's media are here. Am I missing something, Iain?
No, you're not missing anything other than it's just the absolute cataclysmic proof that we've got the wrong people running our country at the moment. Yep. People who are absolutely blind to opportunity. You know, if you know it was any other group, it just shows you how corrupted the whole thing has become. If you were to go out in Scotland and a month ago and pick 10 people at random and say, put together a campaign to further Scottish independence, do any of us believe that those 10 people would have not come up with the opportunity that COP26 presents and put together a programme to highlight, as Phil says, to every media outlet across the whole of the world, that Scotland, A, wants independence, B, if it were ever to further green issues in this country, it must be done with the people who own the resources of this country. You know, I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. And the fact that all these rag dolls, you know, who represent us, all just go along like nodding dogs in the back of the car, you know, going along with us. It's appalling. And they should all be ashamed of themselves. Phil's angry. You're angry. I'm angry. Anyone who understands campaigning recognises what an enormous, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity COP26 is to further our cause. It would be the talking point round the world.
Correct.
Westminster would go apeshit. Great. That's our purpose. Our idea is to upset the apple cart.
Show their teeth.
You'll never get a better opportunity than the next couple of weeks. And the fact that our leader is abandoning that opportunity makes me think, you know, well, what would she ever do in any circumstance to further the cause?
Absolutely.
And Iain, sorry to interject, but you know, we spent the last couple of weeks bemoaning the fact that they say that the British press and the mainstream media are not giving Scotland their fair share, their fair crack of the whip, not giving us a platform, not giving us, you know, to say our piece. Well, there you go. You've got the biggest platform you could ever imagine, and you decide no thanks. What we'll do is we'll put FOIs into BBC Scotland to say, why did you give the Conservatives, 13 minutes and only give the SNP 3 minutes? That's we would fight over nothing, over crumbs, over it's all style and no substance. 100,000 at minimum you would put on the streets, and there would be marches all over Scotland in solidarity.
That's what we need. It's what we need.
Yeah, because it's not even about what you're putting to the. Sometimes you've got to play to your own gallery. Sometimes you've got to talk to your own people. There's millions of people, literally millions of people in Scotland that desperately need independence.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's. My worry is that with this constant, now is not the time. Now is when conditions are perfect, when we're past COVID, when we realise how worked out how COVID's going to work out. If Saturn and Venus align and it's on a Wednesday night, and no, look, if you're the leader, it's your job. It's your job to make the case.
To lead.
And you've already got millions of people in Scotland that are behind you. And sometimes those are the people that you need to speak to, because I think she's taken. In the pursuit of the soft nose, the hard yeses are being abandoned every day. And what worries me out with Twitter and Facebook and stuff, when you're meeting people day to day, is people are getting apathies kicking in. If the leader of your movement, who's like Phil says, your raison d'etre is to fight for independence, if you're not doing that, then who is? It's no Angus Robertson. It's no Pete Wishart. It's none of these people are. And as an activist, a long time before I was in any kind of elected politician, that's what you need. You need that fire to keep you going out and chapping doors. And if you're the leader of that cause and you're not doing your job, well, move it away and let somebody else who can do, or admit that that's not what you want. But be honest with people. Don't go in an interview and say everybody knows I really want independence. Well, show me then.
Well, actions, as you say, speak louder than words. Phil, one thing I noticed over the last few weeks was what I call the peril clutchers. The ones that, don't rock the boat, don't scare the horses, don't upset anyone. Were complaining bitterly that because, unlike Nicola Sturgeon, the railway workers and the bin men in Glasgow went, oh, wait a minute. Oh, COP's 26, now's our time to progress our claim for better wages and conditions. And people say, oh, that's terrible, you're holding the government across a barrel. You bet your sweet ass we are. And that's exactly what they did. And I applaud them. That was the time to strike. That was the time to do it. They knew that the governments of both the UK, and it wouldn't surprise me if both the UK government and the Scottish government have gone to the unions and said, here's some extra money, no bother, and kept it quiet just to buy peace. By the same token, this was Nicola's biggest opportunity, Phil, to turn around and say to Boris, oh, you don't want to get, we don't agree with the Section 30. However, she could have been on the trumpet saying, you don't want to give me a Section 30? Well, I'm going to put 200,000 people in the streets of Glasgow, Boris, and I'm going to humiliate you and embarrass you about this. And he might have given her Section 30. God forbid he might have given her it. But she could have demanded anything, could she not?
Yeah, what irritates, you think of the tradition here of trade unionism, the Red Clydesiders, Scotland, we're all of Labour stock, we're all of socialist movement, the ragged trousered philanthropist sits on most shelves. And you think, the trade unions, there's a great strong tradition of the trade unions fighting. When Labour was the behemoth and the trade unions actually mattered and were listened to and were organised. Look at what France is doing. How do you think the French would behave in this situation? Do you think for 1 second there wouldn't be loads of fish outside? A guy, what we got is a guy crapping on a toilet outside Westminster. The whole country should be in uproar, absolute uproar, because of what's happening here. And it's not. And what irritates me is, as Denise said earlier, it's like the apathy setting in. We're of this stock. We're of revolutionary stock. The Red Clydesiders, this is where we got off. We've been Labour since 1955, since the last time we voted for the Tories. And then when they betrayed us, we turned to SNP. And that's the concern. What are SNP doing now? Are we? Because I'm still a member, and I'm getting more than a wee bit miffed by the situation. I can't understand it, and I've gone beyond miscomprehension to the stage of, look, we need to do something, and if you're not prepared to piss, get off the pot.
It's Iain. It is dire times, and what do we do now if this isn't the time? How do we advance the cause?
Well, I think, if you pass up this opportunity, there's one thing you know for certain: you'll never ever be handed a better one than this. So what you're doing is quite openly, seemingly taking pride in turning down the opportunity, accepting the leader of the country, accepting second-class status in our own country. That's a long way back to get back from that. So I think what we need to do as a country is recognise that the SNP are no longer the party of independence. They're the independent. They've got other priorities, most of which, according to polls, are supported by less than 20% of the people in Scotland. That's not a party that should be in government. Therefore, as quick as the electoral cycle allows, we need to replace them from top to bottom. And that's the only way forward. The independence movement will not move forward under the current management.
No, I agree. We're coming to the end, as always. It goes so quickly. But there's one other topic I want to, which is kind of related to it, I want to go into, being the COP26, and to show the government we're actually up against. This London government is the most incompetent government in my life, full of people. I mean, we know the stories about Dominic Raab, who went to Dover and went, oh, I never knew it was that close, and that so many of our exports went there. Or when the Secretary of States for Northern Ireland go to a meeting in Stormont and say, no, I haven't read the Belfast Agreement. Why would I? This is what we're up against, people who are summoning the French ambassador. But the classic one for me this week, two things before COP's coming up. They literally dump feces and urine into all the rivers and seas around England. And on the same day, they announce that they're no longer going to import mineral water from Europe, but only sell good British mineral water, while they're literally putting shit in the rivers. Am I missing something again? How stupid do you have to? And this is the week before that, and they also half the flight tax to encourage more flights. It is laughable. Your ending comments on that, my friends. Michelle.
Oh. I mean, I think this is more than anything what's so frustrating. You should be kicking at an open goal. The current government. I mean, we because we're of a certain age, we look back to the times at Thatcher. This is Thatcher's wet dream. A conservative government. She would have never imagined that you could get away with half of the stuff that they're getting away with now, and just in plain sight. Unfortunately, I think it's a similar situation in England as it is in Scotland. They're there because they're a lack of a decent opposition.
Correct. Basically,
they're so hopeless. But unbelievably, the Labour Party are even more hopeless. Who are you going to look for salvation? Sir Keir Starmer? I think not. Anas Sarwar in Scotland? I think not. It's ridiculous. And we seem to have passed that point. When years ago, when you first became involved in politics, there was this idea that there was a certain level of integrity. Now, most of that might have been a sham, but the idea that if you do something really badly, especially if you've got one of the top jobs, the captains have said, the big state jobs, that if you mess up and you do really badly, then you're expected to resign. You're expected to step aside, and acknowledge that you failed. But in both governments, whether it's in Scotland or England at the moment, it seems to me a kind of
no integrity.
That's where we go to, is kind of, well, we're not as bad as them. They're worse than us, and they're even worse than us. Nobody's. It's a race to the bottom, and nobody's really held account for the fact of what they don't deliver anymore. And apathy amongst the voting population is that kind of we we've came to expect people to be corrupt, to be thieves in plain sight, to be liars, to ask to be judged on legacy issues that then they don't refuse to be judged on them, you know.
I was going to say, I agree with you. I mean, going back to Thatcher, we're talking about Thatcher and her government, the Falklands War. I've forgotten his name now. He was an old-fashioned One Nation type Tory, one of the gooder or better ones, who was the Foreign Secretary. His name's gone from the moment. But he resigned.
No.
No.
Carrington.
Lord Carrington he became. James Carrington, he resigned because it had happened in his watch. And even though the intelligence or whatever he'd been given hadn't been sufficient, he was honourable enough to throw himself on his own sword. A whole government was brought down because Profumo was sleeping with a prostitute who was also sleeping with a Russian diplomat. But as you say, nowadays they can steal, rob, get found in court guilty, and Phil, nothing happens to them. Gove and Hancock were named in court as having broken the law. No charges ensued, and no resignations were coming. We definitely live in worse times.
Yeah. I mean, you're all talking about integrity and whataboutery, that famous Northern Irish concept. But I know these people. I know many of these people, and there is zero integrity in this Tory party. They were not considered by Cameron or May as even possible candidates for the cabinet. They're malleable bench fillers. That's what these people are. They're just as Boris says, they're exactly what Boris says. Boris is not calling the shots or pulling the strings. Boris will be rewarded for taking out a Brexit by the hedge funds after he leaves office. He'll get a comfy job in the city, big money. That's how it works. So look at the I think it was in Private Eye, the revolving door, fantastic article. It really nails it. But these people are not even mediocre. When I think back to some of the Conservatives, you had to be respectful of. Rory Stewart is excellent. No matter what you think of his policies, the guy's conscientious, knows his brief, speaks articulately, does his research, doesn't bullshit, and has integrity. He walked away when he says, "No, I can't work for Boris. Guy's a clown." Long gone. These are all gone. All these people are either no longer there or are sidelined by this government, and there is no chance of recovery. And quite frankly, it's a great opportunity for us. Let's take it and get the hell out of this United Kingdom.
We should get out, Iain. I mean, the old story, they say, let's get rid of Boris, but who do we get in his place? Michael Gove? Priti Patel? Sunak? I mean, even
Scotland, though.
I was going to say that you've replaced Angus Robertson.
Yeah, I mean,
Brown,
we're not in a superior position,
No.
I mean, who would replace Nicola as leader? Angus Robertson? That would probably be worse, I mean, she has surrounded herself by her pals.
Mediocrity.
And there's no ability coming into it. And, I mean, Phil's right about what's happened down south as well. But, I mean, whose fault is that? Ultimately, it's the electorate's fault. Ultimately, people should have taken a far greater interest in who they were supporting in elections.
And why.
Exactly. And I mean, every one of us have got to take responsibility for that.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's such a tragedy that at a time when Phil is right, we've got the most incompetent, corrupt Tory government at Westminster. We find in Scotland the party that should be able to take the most out of that opportunity are both incapable and unwilling to do so.
And corrupt.
Stuffed full of time servers. Mm-hmm. People are there to collect a salary, not to deliver independence, not willing to take a single risk. Mm-hmm. To win a campaign, you need to have people in your party who are willing to take risks, who are willing to go out there, who are willing to go a step further than others would normally do. And that's the way you pull a campaign through. Our problem is we've got a weak leader at the front, and then we've got a whole pile of weak people 100 yards behind her, busy queuing to get their wages every week. That's the level of commitment that's been shown. And we're witnessing, as I say, the greatest opportunity in any of our lifetimes, before or after, this next couple of weeks, and we're doing nothing. It's an absolute tragedy.
Yeah, I as an old campaigner myself, God, I wish I had this. I was high up in the Scottish government just now, because I would have this place heaving and jumping. But this is a party who's got a guy in it who's not been expelled, who's threatened to use and advocated gun violence against women, and he's not been expelled, he's not been sacked. That's the party we've got. And they're not interested in independence. Anyway, I could go on and on all day, and I'm sure we all could. We've come to the end of our time together for this episode, my friends. I've got to thank you. Thank you for coming in from India again. Phil, don't you be getting delly belly now, my Coatbridge Cavalier.
It's the only way I can lose weight. And there's one other thing that just jumped out there when I was thinking about what we were saying and it's a paraphrase Orwell. He didn't actually say it. He was born about 70 miles from here. Funny enough, Orwell was born in just in the same state that I'm working in, a remote state in northeast India. But what he said was, people who vote for corrupt politicians are victims and not accomplices. It's a paraphrase. I'm paraphrasing. He didn't exactly say that, but that was the intention of it. So what your guys are saying is 100%. We're responsible for this, and the only way we can change it is by to take responsibility for the position we're in.
Could I just say my last point, Michelle? The sun's there. The sun shines upon the righteous. My friends, thank you very, very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed our wee chat, although I'm angry at what we were talking about, and to see my country missing another fabulous opportunity. Unless you people out there make your feelings known. And a good way is we've got to get as many boots on the street on November the 6th as possible. But until I speak to you again, please, 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 take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.